Okay, you are recording. Hi, welcome everybody to Special Populations. This is always one of the highlights of the semester, to have a guest speaker to come into the house. You can tell we've been doing these remote learning for way too long, to come into the classroom and talk to us about their experiences working with a specific population. So today we've got Ms. Bethann Rohaly. I've known Ms. Rohaly for many years, since she was a graduate student here at Winthrop, and I'll let her tell us a little bit about her background and how she got here. Okay. All right. So Ms. Rohaly, go right ahead.
Okay, Dr. Wojcik, I would like to say hello to everybody, and I hope you're having a good semester. My background is that I started out in the gym setting. I actually had an undergrad, and I was a personal trainer and had a bunch of certifications there. And I was a health and PE person, but I loved the gym, so I ended up doing full-time gym work. And as a result of that, we ended up having some people come into the gym that were spinal cord injured. I worked with a lot of spinal cord injured, also amputees, post-stroke, brain injury, and I could go on, knees, shoulders, whatever. And I work with them post-rehab, which means I was working directly with Health South and having people referred to me. And I was just basically building a clientele, all rehab or post-rehab. And then after that, I had my own accident and I got injured, and I was unable to do that anymore and went back to the classroom. But at that point, I decided to pursue a master's degree that legitimized all the information that I was doing and gave me some new information, helped me grow. And I did that at Winthrop University. And I graduated in 2011 with my master's degree in exercise science, and now I'm an adjunct at Winthrop, teaching in the health class, the Health 300 class. I have a passion for working with people that have injuries, and presently do things like water aerobics with seniors and other populations. So I continue to try and work with people.
Mm-hmm. And then so many of the students in the class aspire to be a physical therapist, occupational therapist, strength and conditioning coach, maybe work with cardiac rehab and other exercise settings. So what are some of the things that they need to keep in mind as a therapist or an exercise specialist in working with the SCI population?
Well, I have to just say in general that whether they're working with the SCI population or any population that has had extreme injury, stroke, all those kinds of injuries, brain injury, are not injuries that happen by themselves. Nobody's born with a spinal cord injury or born having had a stroke. These are all injuries that happen to able-bodied people that switches their life suddenly from being able-bodied to disabled. And so the first thing we have to do is remember that they are going to have goals. They want to go back to being as normal as possible. And so we can set up all the goals in the world. If our goals don't match up with their goals, they're not going to buy in. And you want somebody to be working hard for you and really making progress. What you really need is buy-in. And so find out, get to know what their goals are, get to know a little bit about them, and match your goals to theirs. I had a woman who was post-stroke. Her big giant goal was that she wanted to get down on the floor with her grandchildren. So every day at the end of our session, we made a point to get down onto the floor and get back up using a chair 3 times. She would do anything during our whole session just so she could learn to do that. I had a spinal cord injured gentleman we're going to talk about today, and his big goal was, if you will just, I just want to roll my wheelchair into the movie theater, which was a slight incline. These are simple things, but it gets buy-in. Also remember that small is huge. Anything that they can do, writing their name could be a huge task for them, eating themselves with a spoon. I worked more with Tetra than I did with the other, with anything else. Yeah. Thank you, Para. I escaped my mind for a second. And so for me, we were always working on big tasks and putting people in all kinds of situations that would appear awkward just so that they could be reach a goal or a milestone. Milestones, again, are huge. Specifically with spinal cord injury, there's a lot of UTIs, and so you really have to work around their schedule and keep track of them. They have a lot of other biological issues, and we'll talk more about that as we move forward. For instance, they gain weight a lot easier because they burn a lot less calories. There's a lot of little things that we have to keep in mind. Right. Finally, when it comes to you guys being therapists and exercise specialists, and I probably should have said this first, is assessment. And you should assess somebody. I assess people every 5 weeks. And just to see where they were at, if they had gained some strength or if they had gained some flexibility or whatever it is, you need to know where they are. And if you don't continually assess a lot of things about them, including mental, emotional assessment, then you are not going to be on your game. And that is huge, assessment.
And, you know, before we go and talk about her main client that's featured in the slides, I do want you to go back for the students and review the other lecture slides where we talk about the differences where in the spinal column they have their injury, depends on their function, but also, again, we mentioned complete versus incomplete. Tetraplegia or quadriplegia means all 4 limbs are affected. Paraplegia usually just means the lower body. But a person can have various function based on their level of injury and whether their spinal cord was completely severed or just bruised in an incomplete injury. So you could have somebody who is a tetraplegia, but they may have a fair amount of function because they have an incomplete spinal cord injury. So
yeah, one of the things that was very important and that you should remember when you're dealing with these people is that the people who are incomplete have a lot higher ability to recover, and recovery is a very crazy kind of window. But when we're talking about a complete means you're severed completely. But in an incomplete injury, which is what the gentleman we're going to talk about in a minute, there is a possibility, if we ever find a cure for spinal cord injury, that this man could in fact be completely re-energized and walk. And there are, I think Dr. Rozic probably mentioned to you, projects like Project Walk, and there's so many companies out there trying to create opportunities for these individuals to get more and more and more ability. I worked with this gentleman, Travis, and I will explain in a few minutes how low into his body we got because he was incomplete.
Yeah, so why don't we move into that? If you can describe Travis, I'll pull up some of the slides of him, how he was injured and how you wound up meeting him in the gym situation.
All right, so I love that slide you have up right now, the one about evaluation. We'll go back to that one. So Travis came to me. He was about 32 years old. He was an extreme athlete. He had been a Green Beret. He had jumped out of airplanes. He had played volleyball, football. He was an extreme athlete. And he was driving on I-95 and got hit, rear-ended, and the headrest snapped on his car, and his head went all the way back. And when it did, it spinal cord injured him. His body, he did not react initially, He actually stood up, walked out of his car, and then got very dizzy because of the swelling that was happening in his spine, in his cervical spine, and then laid down and never got back up. So initially they told him that he would be in a chair, that he would have to have an electric chair, that he was not going to be able to do anything, and he got angry. And he said, no, I'm not going to live that way. And he doesn't. He basically said, I'm going to be in a regular chair and I'm going to figure this out. And so he came into my gym one day and said, can you help me? And I said, yes. I didn't even know how I was going to help him fully. At first, it was just, yes, I can and I will. And we did. And from that point forward, it was kind of a ride. He started out the most that he could do. He could not push his own chair for more than 3 feet, and certainly not in any kind of an incline. He was not capable of holding his body up in his chair. He had to wear a belt across his body to hold him against the chair, or he would fall out. He was definitely a cervical tetra. C5 was his injury. And then after that, he basically, we just played and made it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you said he came in, they wanted to get him a power wheelchair, and that was another thing that he just refused to do.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the power electric chair. Yeah, he absolutely refused. He said, I will never buy one of those, and he never has. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now he is a athlete. He has a racing chair that he races in with his arms, and so he actually he's actually quite an athlete still in the spinal cord races.
Mm-hmm. And so with the the modifications that Ms. Rohaly is going to talk about, a lot of these modifications, for example, we'll talk about posture. And then some of the other things that she was able to use with him that are already in the gym that most people are going to be familiar with, or things that you can buy that you can add to make working with this population more effective that's very inexpensive. A lot of these would also work with people who have, say, like amputations, traumatic brain injury, stroke as well. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit about. We'll go through some of these slides and we can talk a little bit about what she did in some of these, what she's doing in some of these examples.
Wonderful. Well, the first thing that I want to address, Dr. Wojcik, is that the individual that's sitting in the chair or on the treadmill or that's had the stroke. I mean, because I did work with a wide variety of people. And I was very blessed in that I was not confined by therapy because I was post-rehabist. I had the ability to really go way outside the box. I hope that no matter what you do, that you go outside the box. It's really important to go outside the box because that's the only way you're really going to stretch for these people. The second thing I want to say is posture. If you are going to do any exercise as an able-bodied person and you do it out of posture, you risk injury. As a spinal cord injured person, they are automatically going to fall out of posture because they don't have the musculature to hold their body up by themselves. So we have to reach in there, and what I'm saying is that you're going to have to get physical with these people. You're going to have to touch them. You're going to have to. It's going to be weird. Sometimes you got to put your arms up and pull them back and put your head up against their head. There were times that we were face to face or cheek to cheek or whatever it took. I'd have my elbows over his shoulders in order to hold him in posture. So while he was doing a pullback or something. Like this alternating cable. Well, you'll see some of the pictures as we go, but go ahead if you would move on to another picture. And so what we basically did was here's an example of how he's right up on my chest. I've got my hands over. That's just to balance him. What I would do before every exercise is put my arms under both his arms, pull him up so that he was sitting as square as we could get him in the chair, and pull his shoulders back to pull his alignment into posture. Otherwise, we're risking injuring something he can't even feel. Let's do another picture. Okay. And he's got his elbow around the chair. In the beginning, he had to have, keep going. I'll show you the, so these are all chest exercises. You can just keep going. Yeah. I'm going to, that's what I was looking for. Yes. He had a, when we were doing posture, what oftentimes and all the time in the beginning, I would put the support belt on him to keep him in posture when he was doing certain things. The other thing I want to mention, if you've noticed, is we're using a lot of cables. What we did was we put a ankle weight around his wrist that had a big loop, and we used clips and the cable machine and hooked the cable directly to his wrist or the ankle grip on his wrist, and we could do any angle depending on which cable we use. So we could go from high to low, low to high, open, close, whatever. And so we used a lot of cable machines and a lot of clips, and we had those bands. We also, if you move on, I think we used a lot of regular equipment in the gym. Let's see. Here's a regular pull-down machine. All I did was take the bench away and pull up his chair to the machine so that he could use it. Keep going. Oh, wait, actually stay there. Yeah. If you can notice on that, go back one, I'm sorry. We used a hook. You know the hooks that when you're lifting a heavy weight and they have a wrist strap? We use those hooks just every day to be his hands. They became his hands. So we would put free weights in them. We would hook them over bars or under bars or wherever. Go ahead.
And because of his injury, he does not have dexterity in his fingers. Because he is tetraplegia, so he can move his shoulders, but he cannot, and he can move his wrists, but he cannot move his fingers. So he cannot grab anything. That's why she had to use the hook straps for the bars.
Thank you. Yes, and pretty much he had very little what do you call it? Eye-hand coordination in the beginning also. I mean, even though he was an athlete, his hands and his arms would not respond quickly either. So we really had to work on all things. So you're seeing a lot of weight for strength, but you'll see in the future here, we did all kinds of exercises beyond that. Go ahead, please. Here, we're just using a Smith machine. We're just like an able-bodied person, only we're putting his chair under the Smith machine and having him lift it. And I spotted him quite a bit. But if you notice, I'm spotting him with only a thumb. You try to really let them take as much ownership as you can. Go ahead. We're just going to zing through some of these. Some of the other things that we haven't gotten there yet. But again, we've got dumbbells in those hooks, and we're raising them. Go ahead, just kind of flip through a couple. Next one. I was looking for the one with the chalks, Dr. Wojcik.
I think that's closer to the end. So here's the.
Okay. Well, this is a neat idea. Yeah. What we do, you can go back to that last one. What we did was we took a regular curl bench that anyone would curl, and we flipped the curl thing around and pulled his chair up to it. So I'm saying you can look in your in any setting and find all kinds of things. Go ahead and keep.
Overhead. And he doesn't have, you mentioned that they have very poor innervation to their triceps. Their triceps don't really.
Triceps detachment is very low. And so if the injury is high, above six or higher, their triceps are going to be very weak. He had the ability, basically his line of feeling was just under his underarms and across. And his biceps were strong. And his forearms were really strong. He had no dexterity in his hands, and he had very little dexterity in his triceps. And even though we gained tricep strength, it's still never, ever balanced with the bicep strength, even after 5 years.
So here's forearms.
Yeah, this is just forearms. You want to build anything you can to give them the ability to do something else. For him, lifting up out of the chair was huge and so forearms were important. And again, his goals and my goals had to match. Another big goal was he wants to walk someday. So we had him in what looks like a high chair. It was a standing chair is what it's called. And you literally, his arms would hold his body up and he would stand in this chair for 10 minutes every day, twice or three times a day, just to keep his legs able to bear his weight, even though he couldn't balance. Here's a four-way head. This is an interesting exercise. Because of his neck injury, we wanted to keep his neck strong, and so that's what we did. We actually did this at least once a week, if not twice a week. We pulled, and I can show you how up close and personal this is. This is, you have to really get personal with your clients. These people are in very special circumstances. Okay. Another thing, I don't think I show you the med balls, but eventually he was catching med balls. He was doing all kinds of other things like that. Here are some of those other things that, that they deal with. You can go through the PowerPoint and just see that. But here, I would like to show you some of the cardio. I think go back one more if you would. There were a lot of opportunities for cardio. Could you go back one more for me?
Okay, yes, there we go. Yes, one time.
If you look down, there's cycling, ergonomic bikes, there's muscle spin bikes. If you're in a therapy session, you are going to have an opportunity to use a lot of this specialized equipment. I was not in a specifically spinal cord injured therapy because he had come out of therapy to me as a post-rehabist. And so we basically used dual cables and other things like that. The Versa climbers are often used when you are working your way down their body. So Travis started out very weak. After about 3 years, he was pulling down to his lats, latissimus dorsi. You know that is below the line of feeling. Now we are talking about he's pulling down weight over 100 pounds. I can no longer help him. I had to get the big guys in the gym to help him because he's pulling down into muscles that he has no feeling. And I can ask him to flex them, and he flexes them at will, even though he can't feel that he's flexing them. I would tell him to flex them, and he wouldn't. I said, can you feel that? And he would say no. But he knew his mind was attached to these muscles. We worked all the way down into his abs. He was actually, we had him on the floor, on all fours, pulling up his stomach, like you would engage your abs. And we also had him leaning against a ball on a stage, and he was pulling forward with his ab muscles by himself. So this took years, but it was amazing. You can go far below the line of feeling. There is no such thing as you're going to be in an electric chair the rest of your life unless you're way up on a ventilator.
And most places are not going to have an electrical stim bike. They're very expensive. They're about, $25,000, but you might be in a facility where you have an electrical stim cycle. So,
what was the name of that place that you were affiliated? You had some interns go to?
Yeah, it was called Race to Walk in Mooresville, just the other Mooresville, North Carolina, near a lot of the NASCAR. And I've got the link in the Blackboard lecture shell. And so people can look at the different types of equipment they have. They have those standing chairs. They've got treadmills that start, at 0. They've got ways to suspend people. They've got the electrical stim bike. So you can take a look at that and see some of the other equipment that they have for their clients. And most of their clients have SCI, but some of them have other disabilities, neuromuscular disabilities as well. So
yeah, and brain injury mimics SCI a lot. So you can see these are also some electrical stimulations. The last thing I want to kind of address in terms of this would be mobility and agility. You don't think of agility as being part of a spinal cord injured person, but actually they have to be able to stop and start just like you do, and they're in a chair. So they're on wheels, you might say. So they need to stop and start. They need to be able to throw and catch, or be able to put their arm up and defend if something's coming towards them or falling from a shelf, or, they actually need core stability, just like we do. So we did a lot of mobility and agility. And I also want to say that he loved it because it was exciting. It wasn't boring. And so that was another. He just loved doing it. We were lucky enough to have, I was in Pennsylvania at the time, and we were lucky enough to have a Pittsburgh Steeler, which was his team, who came into our gym all the time. And this guy was great. He would throw himself in a chair, put two 45-pound weights on him, wrap his hands, and race with Travis. And so these kinds of things, this is when we're going to talk a little bit about the mental, emotional. And then obviously the flexibility. If they're tight in an area, you do need to pre-stretch, because that really helps them have more mobility. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, contractures are very common. People who have some sort of spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy. So There's the core exercise.
And this is when he started getting stronger. This is past 3 years in with him. Like I said, I had some of the big guys start working with him. He was very tall. Travis is very tall. He's over 5'5". I want to say he's 5'6".
6'5".
I'm sorry.
6'5".
6'6". Yeah, 6'5", 6'6", not 5. So in a chair, even in a chair, he's just really tall. So that kind of gives you an idea.
So here's the obstacle course. Yeah.
I don't think we have it mobile, but it might be in their PowerPoint. But he actually, I made him do start stops. I made him do weaves. I made him do all kinds of things out in the parking lot, so that when he was in situations, he could stop himself in a mall or going down a hill, or he needed to learn how to take care of himself.
Okay, and then we'll move on with some of this. And then, of course, quality of life.
Which is from the beginning, the first thing I told you. The very first thing that I told you. They want life to be as normal as they can. Bathing. And for Travis, it was driving a car. He eventually drove his own van, and then he got, which he could not ever get into by himself. Somebody had to push him because his triceps never got strong enough to go up the ramp to the van. But we would often push him knowing where he was driving to, and then the person, when he got there, would help him off. So he could drive a car. I went many, many times in a car with him all over the place. Moving objects around in their home, being able to just the more things they can do that makes life as normal as possible. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit, and this is kind of, you didn't ask me the question, but I'm going to go there. Okay. Basically, what is the most important thing? We as therapy people are all focused on the physical, but ultimately the physical is not the most important thing. It is going to happen when the mental emotional gets met. So relationships, being talked to, that picture is a great picture of what not to do. When you're having a conversation with somebody in a wheelchair, you should drop to one knee and look them in their eye so they don't have to look up at you if you're going to be talking more than a few words. You should be having the conversation on one knee. You should be teasing them. I can remember Travis came to our house one time to watch a football game, and they were trying to get him up a step, and he's a really big guy, and they were lifting him, and my husband was saying to him, "I'm going to drop you out of this chair." I mean, they want, just like any of us, they want to be razzed. They want to be talked to. You know what I mean? Understand that life is normal. They were able-bodied once. And now they're not. And so they want to be, there's that acceptance, that improved physique. They want to look good. They just all the things that any able-bodied person would want.
And then here we go, our quality of life. Again, all of this quality of life, constantly evaluating, assessment, evaluating. Again, they're going to make progress. The progress is going to be very, very slow. We keep talking in the class about progression. How do you progress somebody? It might be a minute more per week, what they're able to do. Maybe it's 30 seconds more per week. Maybe it's 2 more pounds that they can lift. So,
oh my heavens. Yeah. I can tell you that in the beginning, he could only work out for 15 minutes. In the end, he was working out an hour 3 times a week with me. Okay. He could work 15 minutes twice a week, and within 3 months, he was to an hour twice a week, and within another 3 or 4 months, he was going 3 times a week. So, yeah, these are some of the pieces of equipment that are kind of neat. So wrist and ankle straps, hooks, the hook straps are the ones that lift the heavy weights. The Velcro gloves are great. We had a Velcro ball. We took a ball, a med ball, put Velcro all on it, the opposite Velcro, obviously, and he could catch and throw the Velcro ball because it had that ability. And then chest and knee straps. We when we didn't want his knees to fall apart, we would put straps around his knees. Eventually, though, I want you to know that people started thinking he was a para instead of a tetra, because he was able to hold his body up by himself. He was actually doing exercises where he had weights in his hooks on his right and left hands, and they were like 15-pound dumbbell on either side, and he was dropping to the right and then dropping to the left and then dropping to the right, going back and forth. These are all muscles that are far below his line of feeling. And the automobile chocks. When he started, his chair started slipping because he was getting stronger. So here's the cables with the hooks. So you can go ahead and just keep going. The cables with the hooks. The hooks were great. They worked on bars. Go ahead and hit the next one. There is, what is that? Hit the next, just it should work.
The chocks are in here somewhere.
Yeah, here we go. Then he had knee straps. We had weights. Oh, I thought the chocks. There they are. Okay, so if you look at the bottom, I don't know if you guys can see that, but at the very bottom, no, the bottom of the left.
Very bottom, yeah. There we go.
There we go. He has these little chocks, and again, we did a lot of free weights, and basically, I think I've explained all this part earlier.
And none of these things are expensive, so they're very easy. You probably, if you don't have them, they're easily to get, and they're not extremely expensive or specialized. So.
And we also used regular cables, like, you know, and big balls and anything that's just around. You'd be amazed. You know, you start out trying to get them to catch a little tiny ball that you spend $3.50 at Walmart. Just like little things, you know, that make a big difference. I want to just end though by saying it's really there's a few. Oh, here's your stationary. Here's all the equipment. Okay, but I wanted to just end by saying it's really important that, number one, you remember that their goals are as or more important than what you have, and if you can integrate your goal with their goal, they're going to work for you. And alignment, if you are training them out of alignment, you are doing them a disservice, because you are training them into injury, just like an able-bodied person. You must constantly be realigning them. And finally, you really do need to assess often, or evaluate often. You need to go back and look at what are they doing, where were they, keep track, where, you know, what is next. We have the ability to really impact these people, because they are coming to us on a regular basis, and we impact them mentally and emotionally and socially as well as physically. And that's a very important responsibility that we have.
And that's a great send-off for the students to really bring it all together, that, you know, we make a big impact on their lives, and it's so important to be able to think out the box, be able to do assessments, you know, and be able to think on your feet, be able to program based on what you have available to you and what the person might even have at home. Is now, especially, we're thinking about that. So anything else, Ms. Rohaly?
No, nothing else comes to mind, but if anybody ever wants to ask me any questions, you are welcome to pass along my email, and I would be more than happy to respond to any questions that they have.
I will do that, and I thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to stop the recording, and I hope to see you soon.